Hello, hello. So, welcome to today's little chat about self-publishing and authoring and all things to do with creating your book. So, this topic is one that is very relevant to me right now because, hey, hello, I'm in the middle of self-editing my latest book, but I thought I would take the opportunity to explain a little bit about what self-editing is, what it's not, and why you use it and how you use it and all of that kind of stuff. So that's what today's about. So my name is Kylie. I am the Author Whisperer and I help indie authors, that's you, that's an independent author, that's someone who is not trying to traditionally publish, but someone who is independently self-publishing. So I help you get your book out of your head and into the world, because I know that is just such an incredibly exciting, potentially minefield ridden process. And my goal is to make it easy and effortless and effective. So that's what I'm here to do, and that's what these live videos and my whole website and everything is all about, is really just making that process of getting your message out into the world as smooth and easy as possible. You'll see a lot of my videos are about demystifying the self-editing process because, demystifying the self-publishing process, I should say, because I think a lot of people want to do it, but they overthink it and they don't really get that this is a lot simpler than you think. So that's what I am here to do, and today it's self-editing. So let's first of all talk about editing versus self-editing, and do you need to do them both? And what's the difference between them, and like, why would I need an editor if I've already self-edited? So let me dispel these myths and help you understand what the process is and why you need to do it as an author. Any author, you need to do this. Okay, so first of all, what the fuck is self-publishing? No, I'm getting my words mixed up. What the fuck is self-editing? What is self-editing? So basically, there are two different sides of your brain, two different hats that you can wear, two different approaches that you take to the art of creation of your book. The first one is the purely creative. It's kind of it's the right brain, creative, non-judgmental, all the stuff and everything just comes tumbling out. That's the fun side. That's the you've probably heard this term, your shitty first draft. That's the side that creates that. Now, it doesn't have to be shitty, but the point is that it is not polished. It's not final. It's not in its published form. It's not in its published form. So that is where you are totally tapping into creativity. Now, the thing about creativity is that it's a delicate thing. It's a finicky thing, and it's like it's sensitive, you know, like that creative spirit pokes its head out, and then, you know, like all it takes is one little snarl or one little red squiggle underneath a word, and like it's dived back into its hole, never to be heard of again. That is often what your creative spirit is like, especially if you have been brought up in a system where that aspect of yourself wasn't nurtured but was kind of squashed into square boxes and round holes and all of that bullshit that happens through the typical education process and the typical growing up process. You know, little children tend to have a beautiful, free, unfettered, non-judged creative spirit. Think of a little child, the change that happens when their self-critical, self-judgment hat appears for the first time. Before that, they would sing and dance with absolutely, you know, free abandon of this is me standing in the true expression of who I am, and how could that be wrong? And then one day, you know, it's usually quite soon after they go to start their schooling, but sometimes it happens before, and suddenly they're shy. And shyness, like, where did that come from? That came from something that was put onto them, to us, from outside. So when you're writing, you want to channel, you want to tap into that inner 3-year-old that had, you know, no qualms about right and wrong, that didn't stand in judgment of themselves, and allowed what was naturally there to come out. That's really what you're trying to tap into. And because in our modern society, this aspect of us is pretty much from the age of 3 has been crushed to nothingness. You know, our society does not give any respect or any encouragement to this. It's the opposite. The opposite is what is encouraged. So because of that, you kind of have to nurture it and baby it along, perhaps even more so than if we didn't live these kind of lives. So when you are writing, when you are creating, you are not editing. This is, I cannot emphasize how important this is, because that is like, you know, bashing down that little fairy of creativity every time she does something wrong, or spells a word wrong, or that doesn't make sense, or what are you thinking, or all of that stuff that goes on. So you have to put aside that, and you have to allow yourself to write a shitty first draft. If it makes you feel better to call it that, call it that. That's an important part of the process. Not just the first chapter, but the whole frigging book, completely unedited and unjudged by that editor, inner editor. Okay. Now, once you've done that, yes, you put it aside, maybe for a few days, maybe for a week, not for too long, but for a small period of time. Allow it to just sit, you know, just allow it to rest and kind of percolate in its own juices for a little bit. Marinate, percolate and marinate in its own juices. Allow it to do all of that. Then you put on your much more comfortable, much more well-worn, much more frequently exercised hat of editor. Now, this is because you would not send that, you know, if we're going to call it a shitty first draft, but I call it just a beautiful download stream of consciousness or whatever. You would not send that to an editor. It's too raw. Like, it really hasn't been polished at all, and clearly there is some polishing needed. We're not all who's it, J.D. Salinger. So J.D. Salinger, I have heard, and you know, this could just be some kind of literary rumor that is completely untrue, but I have heard that he wrote his shitty first draft for Catcher in the Rye and said, don't change a word. If you change a word, like, I won't publish with you, and like, that's how it's got to be published. Yeah, I don't know if that's true, or I might even have the author mixed up, but I'm pretty sure it was a Salinger. I'm pretty sure it was. We don't all have the talent where we can just download something that goes on to become a classic. I don't. Let's speak for myself. I really allow myself to write as crappily as I need to get the message out. I'll repeat myself. I'll go back over it, and look, I won't go back over it, but I will go over a topic multiple times, even though I know that I've kind of already covered that, because the next third or fourth time I might maybe cover it a bit better. Now, when I finish the whole book and I've got the whole book done, I come back into self-edit, and that's when I tidy up all that stuff. I knew I was going to tidy it up, so I'll go through and I might have the same thing repeated 3 or 4 times, and I'll pick out the best one, or I'll mix and match, you know, all of that stuff. So that's what self-editing is. Now, I am pretty structured with my self-editing. What I actually do is I do multiple self-edits. Basically, because I have no intention of using an editor as a content editor, when I send my book away to an outside support person, my editor, I am not looking for a content editor. I am purely looking for a copy editor. What's the difference between those two? A content editor will give you feedback about the actual content and will say, look, I think you should probably put chapter 1, you know, at the end or halfway through, or I think, you know, this doesn't really make sense because that should have been explained before this, etc. They will give you detailed feedback and suggestions on the content of your book. Now, I have no intention of using an editor for that because I know my topic well enough and I feel that I have enough of a grip on how to contextualize my message that I'm the one who I want to do that. And that's what the self-editing process is. A copy editor will go through and go, you spelt that wrong, and there's like a comma where it should be a semicolon, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that I put my hand up. I need so badly because I have atrocious spelling, as my high school English teacher will attest to. He told me that all the time. He also gave me full marks and top of the class every year, but atrocious spelling. So he's probably one of the big reasons why I never had my spirit crushed by him, because even though he said your spelling is atrocious, which it was and still is, he recognized the spirit within me and rewarded that. So anyway, sidetrack. Let's get back to self-editing, because I haven't even touched on how. I've told you what, but let's talk a little bit about how, because that is super important. So as I said, I'm very structured in my approach to self-editing. I want my book to be as polished, and by that, I don't want it to lose its rawness, but I want it to be a pleasant, enjoyable, a rollicking ride for my reader. I really am putting myself in the shoes of my reader when I am self-editing. I am, you know, I want this to be an enjoyable experience, not a heavy wade through, because like who's going to do that? No one's going to do it, right? Okay, so this is a bit of a glimpse of my self-editing process. So we go through and we do a read through of the whole thing, and in that's where it's pretty rough, and that's where I'm getting, you know, when I was saying I might repeat the same concept multiple times trying to get the right, you know, the right gem. That's where I'm tidying up all that stuff. I usually get rid of thousands of words over the whole draft in that first run through, you know, because I'm tidying it up, and often I find that in my first draft I will be a little bit superfluous with my language. I'll repeat myself unnecessarily. So tidy all of that up. That is usually where, you know, I will lose a good, like say I've written 30,000 words, it'll go down to 25 easily. So that's the first one, and that can take weeks. Like that's not a quick process. That's pretty heavy going. That actually can take as long as writing the book itself. Then I go through and I do at least 2 or 3 more complete edits. And each one of those edits, I will have a different focus. So I'll actually be specifically looking at a particular aspect. Let's say, for example, I want my message for each chapter, let's say, to resonate and to be relatable. And the way that I do that often is to make sure that I incorporate an anecdote or a story from my life, or maybe one of my clients' experiences, so that it gives it context, and it gives it something memorable. Like we all know a story is so much more memorable than just explaining a technique. So I will actually go through and I will weave in stories. So that will be a whole edit. I'll go through each chapter, and if I haven't used an anecdote in a chapter, I will bring one into it. So that's another edit. A third edit might be one that I like is the goldfish edit, I call it. And so the goldfish edit is, let's assume that everyone reading this book has ADHD or has the attention span of a goldfish, i.e., you know, like that's as long. And so I need to make sure that it is enticing enough the whole way through, and no dead wood, no dull bits, no like just saying words for the sake of them. So that is a whole edit in itself. And again, I usually take a few thousand words off in that edit. Oh my God, it's terrible when you're doing these live streams because you get a full picture of yourself, and like I'm like, oh, why didn't I wash my hair? Don't worry, you probably didn't even notice. Now you're noticing. So that was smart. Anyway, okay, so that can be a whole edit. And I will do maybe possibly another couple like that. I mean, I want this to be tight. I want my book to be tight. So I might go through and do another one I have done in the past with previous books. And you know what? I'm quite proud of myself. I need to do this one less, but this is the pedestal edit, because I tend to be a bit of a, like, get up on my high horse and tell everyone how it's done. Ask my son, he knows that seems to be the way that we interact, and like, I guess maybe that's a mother and child thing, I don't know, but it's really annoying. You know it, right? I know it. I hate it when people do it to me. So I make sure I go through, like, am I preaching too much? Is this like, you know, or am I talking to a friend? Am I making this a personal conversation, or is this like like some kind of a missionary, like up on the pulpit? Because that, like, I want my tone to be consistent, and I also want it to be relatable. So I'll go through and I'll edit the whole thing looking through those eyes. Now, as you can imagine, with each of these passes, it's quicker because the whole book is tighter anyway, but like it takes time. It will take time to do this editing. The final edit is the worst/best one. It's the worst one because it takes the longest, and it's the best one because it's the final one, and that is a verbal read-through. Oh my God. A verbal read-through, I used to record it, but now I don't bother recording it because it's not like I'm ever going to listen back to it. But a verbal read-through, it's shocking what you catch, especially when it's at the end of 2 or 3 self-edit passes, and then you do a verbal read-through and you're like, like, what am I saying? There's obviously, when you verbally read it through, you catch a lot of stuff that had passed under the radar. So that's self-editing. Now, why? So that's my how. Like that, I've really just given you a breakdown of the step-by-step of self-editing. I think for each of us, we'll have a different maybe set of focuses for each pass, but I'm still going to encourage that you do multiple passes, not just one, not just 2, but minimum 3, and potentially, you know, a few more. That will end you up with a really tight manuscript. That's what you send to the editor, so that you've finished your self-editing. That's now your finished product. So you send that to the editor. Now, of course, now your editor has something that is smooth and tight to work with, much easier for them for a start, and which means that, you know, it'll be a faster process for them, but also a more pleasant process. And really super important that you don't hand the shitty first draft to your editor, because like they will charge you a fortune, because like it's going to take them a long time. That they'll be doing the kind of things that you should have been doing. But as I began in this recording, the most important thing, so important, is not to try and do that editing while you're in the creative phase. Like, you will kill your creative spirit dead, and it has been the death knell of that many writing careers, because people aren't separating these two aspects of themselves, or probably more obviously what they're doing is that they are not nurturing the creative side. They're not nurturing that aspect of themselves that probably hasn't been nurtured very much since they were 3 years old. And you're not allowing it to have full reign and to make mistakes, and to, like a child, to sound like an idiot singing, like it's okay, let it, because how else are you going to get better at something if you don't try it badly 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 times? So really allowing that and accepting it, and letting that process unfold unfettered, unjudged. Just keep that frigging red pen editor judgment out of the picture, and that takes discipline. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is, but also how much discipline it takes, because the way our society has trained us is to be very critical, to look for the mistakes, especially in ourselves. I mean, how self-critical are we all? Hello. It seems to be like the fashion to kind of self-depreciate and, oh no, not me, or all of that crap that we do. And that is seen as acceptable, and it's approved of in our frigging warped society to do that. And all that's doing is emphasizing that self-critical part of us, and de-emphasizing or squashing or destroying the natural creative spirit that does make mistakes and does say stupid things and do stupid things, and just like a child is in the moment and reacting and creating and being a free spirit. And that is like scary to our society. So we put that in a box real early on, and we do not let it out ever. So as authors, we are letting it out of the box. Ooh, that's scary. That's scary. And every fiber of our being is railing against it, and is, all of our societal upbringing is coming up and going, oh no, you can't say that, you can't do that, you can't be that, that's not right. So it takes discipline to hold yourself against that. And I think a true creative is someone who is able to step on that creative journey and hold themselves despite, forget what the rest of the world's thinking. It's yourself. It's your own critical self that you need to hold out against, and you have to be strong. You have to be disciplined. One of the exercises that I do, I love doing this exercise because to me this shows how much control I have over what I give my attention to. And I think for most of us, we are like a candle flame in the wind. We just go this way, and we go that way, and we go this way, and we go that way. Like we're reactive. We don't hold still and go, no, fuck you. This is the direction I'm going. This is what I'm doing. We don't do that, right? So, one of the exercises that I like to do, the best place to do this is when you're driving, or when you're in a car, I guess, or a bus or whatever. But when you're moving through the streets and suburbs, cities, towns, the exercise I like to do is I'm not allowed to read anything. Now, the main place that applies to is billboards, ads on buses, like they're the classic ones, ads on the back of taxi cabs, ads on shops, all of that stuff. It's advertisement 99% of the time. Yeah, okay, of course you're going to read street signs. Yes. That's not what I'm talking about. It's stop signs. You don't need to read a stop sign like it's a red light or a red hexagon. And like that's international. You don't need to read the words, but that's not what I'm actually talking about. I'm talking about the enticing way other people try to get into our brain and say, look at this ad, look at that ad, look, bright colors, look, beautiful woman, or attractive male torso, or weird picture that I don't know what it is, so I need to look and read the ad. I mean, like, they employ 1,000,001 different techniques to grab your eyeballs. That's what they're trying to do. Me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Now, my exercise that I have is that I try to, on my journey driving, is not read any of them. Of course, in the periphery, I'm going to see the colors of the ad, and I'm sitting right behind a bus. How can I not see that there's an ad on that bus? But I am not reading it. I am not reading it. I'm not reading it. I'm not giving it my attention. I will. It's amazing. It's an amazing exercise to do, and I've been doing it for so long that I'm pretty good at it now. I can usually, have a journey and not be pulled, not be distracted. I can do it pretty well. But I tell you what, when you begin, when I first started, 1 second and you'd be pulled in, you'd be looking at that, reading this, and reading, I don't care. I don't care about all this stuff, and yet it's filling my brain with its hooks. I don't know. Now, why this is a good exercise, because what, Kylie, what the fuck has that got to do with writing a book and authoring? It's the same kind of level of discipline and self-awareness and concentration, single-pointed concentration that you need to hold your creative spirit in the face of your editing red pen spirit that wants to come in and correct and say, that's dumb, you shouldn't say that, and who do you think you are, and all the other bullshit in self-talk undermining stuff that we all have and do. So that is the driving exercise that I just described is kind of like a non-emotional forum for practicing that particular skill. And then you bring it to your writing. You start getting good. I mean, it's a meditative skill. It's the same thing with meditation. You're trying, when you're meditating, the idea is that you're not getting distracted by this or that or the other, whether it's thoughts or noises or pain in your body and all of that stuff. The idea is that, no, I'm focusing on my breath or whatever it is you're meditating on. So it's a similar kind of skill that is required, and most of us live our lives in reaction to our external circumstances. Instead of being the one setting the agenda, we are simply a reactive flame in the wind to whatever's going on around us. Doing that first draft as an author, it's about ignoring, shutting out that critical voice that is trying to edit for you and say, oh, hang on, let's just tidy that up. Can we go back and you've spelt that wrong? And no, not looking at the bus signs, not looking at the ads, right? It's the same thing. You're blocking it out. You're going, no, I'm honoring my creative process. I'm honoring my creative spirit. She's a delicate little thing that only needs someone to sneeze in her direction and she'll run scurrying off back into her hole, and there'll be no coaxing her out, unless you've got sort of really nice little fairy cakes for her or something. So there you go. That is my gift to you today is the self-editing journey. I love it. I used to hate it. I love it because now I'm able to actually enjoy it and see it for what it is, a vital part of the process. And you know what? Now that I've written a few books, I find that my shitty first draft is nowhere near as shitty. I really don't like using that term because it is so judgmental, and it's the reverse of everything I've been trying to say. It's just that you know what? Here we go. Here's a reframe for us. What do you think? It's that creative, no. wild. It's the wild spirit first draft, okay? What I'm finding as I've written a few books is that wild spirit first draft, oh, that sounds so much better. That wild spirit first draft is no less wild, no less creative, but is naturally forming the structure that it was going to happen anyway. Like, it's a bit hard to explain, but basically when I'm going through and doing my editing, there's less editing. I never want to unwild my writing. I want my writing to have a wildness, and authenticity would be the best description for that. I want it to be authentic. That is super important to me. That is my, that's the way that I want my writing to come across. But I do appreciate that in a book things have to have a tightness, and there's a reader experience. I want the reader to experience the authentic message coming through me, but it has to have it has to be a pleasant journey, right? So what I'm finding is, as I've written a few books, that I know the formula, I know the format, and it's not deviating from the authenticity in that wild spirit first draft. It's not deviating from that at all, but it is it's just a little bit more practice. I don't know. I'm not even sure how to explain it, but I do know that it's easier. Maybe I've just reframed my approach to it. Anyway, tell me if you are in that self-editing phase, because oh boy, it's fun, and it should be fun, and it can be challenging, but let's hope that this message I've given you has encouraged it to be maybe a bit less challenging, or see the method to the madness. All right, guys, so awesome to spend some time with you. Thank you so much for liking this video, and for enjoying it, and for sharing it if you got some good messages from it. Thank you so much. Don't forget to write like nobody's watching. So important. All right, bye-bye.